Sarah, how's it going? Excuse me while I fix a camera. Yeah. Cool. There we go. Cool. Hello, everyone. Looks like one of my cameras is breaking. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Today we're doing a Szechuan, I guess it's like a Szechuan noodle dish called dan mian. The reason that I say I guess it's a Szechuan dish is because dan mian comes from a lot of places. One of the main places that it comes from is Szechuan cuisine, but mostly it's just like a Chinese dish, but also kind of like pervasive across a lot of Chinese American food. So if you have any questions for me, feel free and drop your questions in the chat. The version of dan mian that we're doing today is loosely based off of another version that you can find here in the Bay Area at a spot called Good to Eat Dumplings. Their version is, I believe they call it a spicy sauce noodle dish, something like that. But what it essentially is a noodle dish that relies very heavily on sesame paste. If you can't find sesame paste, or if you don't have sesame paste, the next best thing, well, I guess the next best thing that you can use is tahini, which comes from Mediterranean cuisine, and tahini is essentially just sesame paste. If you can't find either of those things, you can also just use good old peanut butter, which is actually my preference for this dish, which is a very, very American thing to do. Today I'm going to be using sesame paste because I have some, and also because we're trying to recreate the Good to Eat version. But my favorite part about this dish is that it is super, super pantry friendly, so you can make almost this entire dish from pantry ingredients. Today we're going to be using fresh shallots, but if you want, you can actually buy pantry safe freeze-dried shallots, which is, I think, actually how the Good to Eat version is done. And if you do that, then the entire dish is pantry safe, so you can make this as pretty much as easily as you would make top ramen. So. Yeah, so if you're looking for the recipe, that always lives over on my YouTube channel, so lots of folks over on the YouTube channel already. That channel has new recipes that come out every Friday, so this particular recipe came out over on the YouTube channel last Friday, so a couple of days ago. So if you're looking for that stuff, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel. Lots of fun stuff coming up over there every Friday. Camera can't break until we get a new mic. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Unfortunately, I happen to have a spare one, so that's good. But the webcams are really cheap though, so if the webcam breaks, it's not a big deal. I think the webcam is only like 20 bucks. That's why this one it's not the greatest camera, but it's also really easy to replace if it does break. So. Okay, so starting off, I'm starting off with 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by about 1 tablespoon or about 1 inch's worth of finely minced ginger. You will find that these 2 ingredients, they come up in pretty much every recipe that I have ever written, because they kind of work as like the fundamental ingredient that we use to establish umami. So anytime that we're dealing in flavors with umami, which is essentially all Chinese food, we work with these 2 ingredients first, and that's so that we can really start building out layers of umami. So it's not that we want everything to start tasting like garlic and ginger. It's just that we are going to use them to like really start building building blocks on top of everything else that we're going to be adding. So the first thing that's going to go into our wok fry are these 2 ingredients, so our ginger and garlic, and then we're going to follow them up with everything else. So we're going to add sesame paste and sesame noodles, some green onions, and a couple other things, all of which are going to start really like building out those layers of umami. But first we're going to start with our aromatics, so that would be garlic and ginger today. For the garlic, you'll notice that all I really did was just give it a really good smack with the flat side of my knife, and then just sliced it up. We didn't really do too much else to it. And that's because garlic is really delicate, so you don't actually need to do too much to it in order for it to start coming apart. But for the ginger, you'll notice that I am being a little bit more intricate with how I'm chopping here because ginger is a root veggie, just like a potato, which means that we have to do a little bit more work to get that fine mince. So if you don't like doing knife work, you can microplane this stuff. But what I'm doing is essentially a a small dice first. So slices down the middle, one down the center, and then that's our dice. And then for our mince, it's just getting the dice and then running the knife through it. Oh, Carb sorry. Yeah, $20 camera, yeah. Yeah. Carb yeah, good point. I probably should upgrade the cameras. These ones I don't care as much about because this one is just pointing at my face, so I don't really care if these are low quality. The expensive camera is this one that's right here, which you could kind of see. That's where the DSLR camera is. That's the one I care more about so that you can see the food. You don't have to look at my face, you can look at the food. Yeah, I don't care if my face is blurry. I do care if the food is blurry though. So, although you're right, I should stop being cheap. Cool. Alright, so that's our ginger. If you're lazy, you can also put that straight through a microplane and you can just grate it, and it would achieve essentially the same thing. But I am a strong advocate for getting better at knife work because it reduces the number of kitchen appliances that you have to use. So usually, I don't break out my microplane unless I absolutely have to. Most of the time, if I'm using a microplane, it's probably something that I can't dice. So like Parmesan cheese is the only thing that I can really think of where I actually use the microplane is for Parmesan cheese. Everything else will probably just do a really, really fine dice or fine mince. Next up though is some green onions. So if you do find that your green onions start wilting, so you can see on my green onions at the ends here, so they're like starting to brown. These are like, I don't know, 2 or 3 days old, so they're not that old, but they will start wilting even more when you the older that they get. Just pick off the wilted part, and it won't. It's not a sign that it's going bad. It's just that it's starting to go old. You just don't want to eat this wilted part, so just pick it off, and it'll still be perfectly fine. We do want to like pick off, like you'll notice as the green onion gets older, it basically is essentially continuing to grow because the green onion is still alive when you're selling it. So when it starts continuing, it will still grow like these smaller bits at the very, very end. That stuff is like a little bit more bitter than the like fully matured portions. So like this part right here, this is still sticking out. You probably don't want to eat that stuff. You can if you want to, but it's going to be a little bit more bitter. So I usually just pick that stuff off. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Hermina, yeah, how's it going? Hello to everyone on YouTube, thanks for tuning in. Hello to everyone on Reddit too. How's everyone doing tonight? Today we're making a dandan mian, which is a Szechuan noodle dish, or I guess like just like Chinese noodle dish. I don't know that I guess dandan mian definitely comes from Sichuan cuisine, but like here in the States, it's mostly just like a Chinese American dish, and I see it at like Shanghainese restaurants all the time, and it's mostly just like a noodle dish that comes up across like a lot of Chinese cuisine. Dandan mian, it can be done in a number of different ways. Today we're going to be doing it with some sesame paste, which is probably the most traditional way of approaching a dandan mian. If you can't find sesame paste though, another really, really common way of doing a dandan mian, well probably the next most common way of doing it would be using tahini. Tahini is essentially sesame paste. That's basically what tahini is. It just comes from a different food culture. It comes from Mediterranean cuisine. If you can't find tahini, you can also just use peanut butter though, which will do something similar. It's actually my preference because I grew up eating like Americanized dandan mian. But definitely if you're using peanut butter and you're making a dandan mian, you're making an Americanized version, which is actually my preference, and we've actually done something kind of similar to that on the YouTube channel. Yeah. And so yeah, oh yeah, thanks for mentioning specific funny. Yeah, so we are also going to be doing a couple of steps to make it spicy. we're going to be using a couple of different elements to create that spiciness. I don't think that it's necessarily like super spicy. In my opinion, I think this particular version of dandan mian is just like mildly spicy with like interesting flavors. So I think like the spices that we're going to be using are the things that are really are spicy. Are going to be Sichuan peppercorn, which is going to be like the iconic peppercorn that you get in a lot of dandan mian. I guess just like a lot of Sichuan food in general. But then the other thing that we're going to be using is a dish or a spice called lieu, which is essentially chili oil. I guess that would be like the closest description is chili oil. So it's red chili flakes that's fermented in oil, I guess. And I think it's also like fried. And what essentially that you get, because it's fermented in that oil, is this really pervasive heat. It's not actually that hot. It's just really pervasive because it's soaked in oil. So that oil is kind of like spreading throughout the dish everywhere that the oil touches, which is basically the whole dish. So that has this really interesting mouthfeel to it, where it's like very like pervasive. It gets like all over the dish, but it's actually not that hot. It's just like very interesting to taste. That's my favorite, like one of my favorite elements to use as spice, and that's mostly because I don't particularly love things that are like aggressively spicy. I just like things that are like spicy in an interesting way, which is why I love using lieu. But first up, that's our green onions, which I just finished talking through. You'll notice that I sliced them. We're slicing all of our green onions as a garnish today, which means that we have to slice the green onions in a very specific way if you're going to use all of the green onions as a garnish. It's because the whites of your green onions are going to be a lot more pungent if you try and eat them raw. Usually what I'll do is I would probably bloom them in the aromatics of the wok fry, so I would probably cook the whites of the green onions. And then just use the greens as a garnish. But since we're using all of it as a garnish today, you have to chop them very thin, otherwise they're going to be really aggressive, and they're going to be like really in your face. It will be probably the equivalent of eating a raw onion. So in order to make sure that they're not super aggressive, the first thing that you could do is just not use the whites. You could put them in the wok fry. But if you do want to use the whites, which I love doing, it's one of my favorite parts of the green onion, is just slice it really thin, and then it won't be so aggressive. Oh, lots of comments. You want to lick the cutting board? Yeah, you can do that if you want. There's actually no meat involved today, which means that it's food safe. Yeah, cool. Yeah, cool. So that's our green onions. Next up is some shallots. So you'll notice that this recipe actually has very few ingredients in it. So this shallots is probably one of the last ingredients that we're going to be using. So no pork, nothing special. And that's because it's meant to be a really pantry-friendly dish. So what that does mean, what I've found is that since there are very few ingredients in this recipe, it means that we have to chop everything and do everything. Everything that you're eating is going to be very present. You're going to taste everything because there's very few things to distract you. So other things like other stir fries, things like mapo tofu or even like a kung pao chicken, things like that, you can hide things if you like mess it up, or if you don't chop it properly, or if you like overdo it on the sauce somewhere. You can make up for it just by like burying it. In a dish like this, though, since there are so few ingredients, everything is going to be up front. So we have to be careful and pay attention to everything that we're doing today. So today these are shallots, which we're going to be deep frying. Which means, so what I'm doing, since we're going to be deep frying them, is I'm paying attention to how the general shape and feel of how these shallots will work. So if you want, you can just buy these freeze-dried at the store. And I actually have done that many times now when I make this dish. It cuts the cook time of this dish down by like, you could probably, if you buy them freeze-dried and just use the pre-made or pre-fried shallots, you could probably make this dish in like 10 minutes, probably even less than that, like probably within the amount of time that you would make top ramen if you skip the fried shallot part. But I love doing the shallots myself because I think that it's like stands out a lot because of how like few ingredients there are. So what I'm doing is I'm chopping my shallots in a bunch of different shapes and sizes. So you'll notice the first half of my shallots over here, These are diced. The second half of my shallots over here, these are sliced, so they're going to be in different sizes, which means that when we put them into the bowl, you're going to have a bunch of different weird shapes and sizes, which will give you a nice, interesting bite to it. If we all chop them, you could also chop them all in the same size, but it's not going to be as interesting. So I'm going to do the same thing with the second shallot here. I'm going to dice, so I'm going to dice the first half, and then we're going to slice up the second half. Yeah. Cooking would be a great hobby if it wasn't for cleaning. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. What I've discovered, I don't do this as much. Actually, I still do it quite a bit when I'm streaming even, but not quite as much when I'm streaming. But a really, really great way to get around that is to just clean while you cook, which is really, really useful, and a really useful way to not end up with a lot of dirty dishes. Especially if you do a lot of mise en place like you do with Chinese food, or just like general Asian food, which is essentially you have to cut. You'll notice that I'm using a whole bunch of bowls right now, so here's a bowl. We're using all of these dishes here, right? Especially if you're using all of these dishes, it's really helpful if you don't like doing a lot of dirty dishes by the time that you finish cleaning or cooking. Is clean them while you finish cooking. So like in the duration of time where the onions go into the wok, there's an extra minute or so. Turn around and clean the dish that was holding the onions, and that will save you a lot of trouble at the end of the meal when you have a bunch of dirty dishes sitting in the sink. So yeah, if you're like really hate doing dishes but you like cooking, just get in the habit of starting to clean those dishes while you're cooking. I find that I don't really do it as much when I'm streaming because I'm so busy talking to you guys, but very, very often if I'm just cooking by myself, that's something that I do all the time. Cool. They have to be uniform, yeah. You could also do a uniform too if you want. Cool. All right, so that's my shallots. What we're going to do is we're going to par cook these in a wok fry, and then we're going to deep fry them. So the par cook, what it's going to do, same way that you would do an onion, it's going to sweat out a bunch of the moisture. So shallots are mainly composed of water. So just like an onion, the shallot has a whole bunch of water in it. So we're going to par cook it in a wok fry and sweat out all of that water, or as much of that water as we can, so that we have like a nice dehydrated onion. And then we're going to deep fry it, and that's going to give us this really, really crispy shallot, which I think is how they do it when they freeze dry those things and you buy them in the pantry. And you can buy freeze-dried shallots. But the problem with the pantry ones is that they're not going to be really crispy because they're dry. They're basically just going to be kind of stale, almost. That's what they taste like to me, is they're kind of stale. Which is like fine. If you're just looking for like a top ramen meal, you could do that and it will probably still be really good. It's still a shallot. It's still going to be really tasty. But I love doing these myself when I have the time to do it because it's going to be really, really good. Yeah. Oh yeah, so you watch it. There are basically 3 ways of cutting a green onion. One is a slice, one is a cut, more of a backward cut, yeah. One is a chop, yeah. Oh, yeah, Hermina, that's a good point. And I'd like to do it if I have an extra green onion. Yeah, let's do it with this. So Hermina, that's a really great point. So there's basically 3 different ways of chopping a green onion. I really only use one of them, maybe 2. But my favorite way, or like the way that I love chopping a green onion most of the time, is by using a back slice. So I'll show you the way that I've been doing it. So normally when you chop, the way that is like in general, the way that I just chop that shallot is you chop by pushing downward. So you push downward on the knife in this direction, and then you just repeat. And you'll find that if you do that enough with something really, really delicate like a green onion, it will eventually start leaving the green onion on the board, because what you're essentially doing, especially if your knife is not super sharp, is you're smashing it. So you're smashing all those cell structures, and it's basically just getting pounded into the cutting board at the point where it's sliced. You're still going to have sliced green onions, so you'll notice that the green onions are still sliced. They look fine. But if you want to be really specific with the way that those green onions turn out, and you want to try and preserve that cell structure as much as possible, what I like doing, and what probably most chefs will do, is cut those green onions using a back slice. So instead of pushing downward, you want to pull back on the knife, so in this direction. And that won't leave as much of the green onion on the cutting board because it's a little bit more delicate. It's also like a little bit more precise, so that you can get really, really thin green onions. So particularly today, because we're trying to cut these things really, really thin, if you're looking for really thin green onions, that back slice is going to help quite a bit, because it will get you super, super thin green onions, like so. So that's green onions. I'm not going to use those because that was looking a little dead. Yeah, good point though. Yeah. Okay. Let's use this. Next up, I'm going to assemble my sauce here. So if you have ever seen a dandan mian come together in street food, or maybe even in some restaurants too, super, super often you will see them doing this part in the finishing bowl. So literally in the bowl you're going to be eating out of. Most of the time that you see that, it's because it is being made on the street. So a lot of the food that comes from Chinese or Taiwanese street food cooking is assembled that way because they're cooking it on the street. So they have very few like counter space and just like general like availability, and they're just trying to make it really, really fast because they're handing it out to people on the street. So the way that a traditional dandan mian is done is literally putting all of the ingredients that I'm about to put in here into the finishing bowl, and then it would just be tossed in that bowl. So there's not even a wok fry involved. I don't particularly love the way that that happens because you don't get a really, really cohesive sauce, and you don't also really have a lot of opportunity to like taste or like really understand what it's actually going to taste like. So what I've been doing is usually you will see me assembling this stuff off heat first. So let me just start with sesame paste. That's really, really useful with sesame paste in particular, because sesame paste has a habit, just like peanut butter, of clumping up. So especially if your sesame paste is old, like mine. Show you. It will look like this. So it was like just like peanut butter, really, really like solid, not really, really smooth, especially if it's old. And it's going to look like that unless you start breaking it down. So, oops. So if we could take a look, let's remove this. Here's some fresh sesame paste. So just like peanut butter, it will have a layer of oil. So this is all sesame oil at the top. What we're after is both the oil and the sesame paste. So just like peanut butter, we want that stuff to be combined. And we need, let's say, like 2.5 tablespoons. But you'll notice that the sesame paste is really, really clumped up. So it has all of these like large chunks in it, just like peanut butter does. So that's going to be a problem if you try and throw that into the sauce by itself, because you're going to get big clumps of sesame paste, which is not what we're after here. We're trying to get this stuff to like really dissolve. So what I love doing, and you will probably even see some street chefs do this, is dissolving it, and you could use water at this point if you want. What I like doing is dissolving it in a little bit of stock though, so that should be about 1/4 cup of stock. And essentially all we're really doing now is just breaking this down into a liquid form, so that when we do and like go to assemble it in our sauce base, we don't have big chunks. So I'm just stirring this up just to make sure that we get all of these large chunks really dissolved into a liquid form. Girls love a shallot in uniform, yeah. All right. Cool. Okay, So once we break that down, we can start adding our other ingredients. I'm going to add, this is going to be 4 tablespoons of soy sauce to start. Followed by 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar. If you don't have rice vinegar, you could just use plain old like white vinegar. Distilled white vinegar will work just as well. Next up is 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing wine, which is a Chinese cooking wine. If you can't find Chinese cooking wine, you could just use dry cooking sherry. Will work just as well. If you can't find either of those things, my next favorite thing to use is sake. Dried sake works really great and is essentially going to achieve the same thing. In my opinion, you could use either of those two interchangeably, and you're probably not going to taste a huge difference. They're going to be pretty close. Let's see, next up is going to be a single tablespoon of brown sugar. We're going light on the sugar today because I don't think that this dish needs too much sugar. So that's just 1 tablespoon. In a lot of the recipes that you'll see me do, especially like the Americanized Chinese ones, you will see me using huge amounts of sugar, like 4 or 5 tablespoons, sometimes a 1/4 cup or more. Just a single tablespoon today though, because I actually don't think this recipe needs or calls for that much sugar. Alright, and last up is going to be our spicy element. So this is probably the most important ingredient to a spicy sauce noodle dish. And this is going to be lieu, which is chili crisp that's fermented in oil. I'm going to use 2 tablespoons. I think the original version, it actually does not include the chili crisp. I think they just use just the oil. I like using the chili crisp. In my opinion, I think that's the most tasty part of lieu. But if you want to stay true to the original recipe that we're mimicking, I'm pretty sure the original doesn't actually use the chili crisp. So I'm mixing that up, and then we're going to add our very last ingredient, which is going to be Szechuan peppercorn. So if you want, especially if you're particularly averse to spicy things, you could skip this ingredient entirely. I do think that it's like one of the more important flavors of a Szechuan dish. You can't really make Szechuan food without Szechuan peppercorn. But we already added quite a bit of heat element, so especially if you don't like heat, you can leave this out. So I'm just grinding this up. If you don't have a mortar and pestle, you can also just do this in a bowl. Or you could just use a plain old pepper grinder. It will work too. And then what I'm going to do here, so you'll notice is that my Szechuan peppercorn, it has a lot of flakes in it that's coming off of the peppercorn. You can eat that stuff. It's totally edible if you don't mind it, if you don't care. If you want though, if you want to go the extra mile, you can put this through a sieve and get those flakes out, those little floury bits. They tend to be a little bit chewy, but if you don't mind it, you can just leave them. And that ought to do it. So that's our sauce. I'm going to mix this up, and then we're going to season to taste with a little bit of salt. This one almost always needs salt. Yeah, that's good. Okay, cool. Let's see. So, over on the stove, before we start our wok cooking, I have my noodles or some water boiling for our noodles here. So we're about to do, if you're familiar with Italian cooking, we're about to do a whole bunch of stuff that you generally would not do in Italian cooking, mainly that we're not going to salt the water, and also that we're not going to save any pasta water. So if you're familiar with Italian cooking, those are probably the two biggest tenets of Italian cooking, is that you never ever ever dump out your pasta water, because it's how Italian pasta is made. It's how like you make carbonaras and bologneses, all of those things that have creamy sauces. It's made from the pasta water, the starch that sheds off in the pasta water specifically. So if you've ever made anything that comes from Italian cooking, that's how it's made, is with that pasta water. So in Chinese cooking, we don't really do that. That's not really an element of Chinese cooking. You could probably do the same thing. You could probably still do it if you want, and trying to like build out like thickness in your sauce, but it's not really something that comes up traditionally in Chinese food. So we're not going to do that part. What type of noodle? Yeah. So I'm not really sure what they would call this in English, but on the package it says Taiwanese fresh noodle, or I think it says Oriental linguine, which is like, not really sure what that's supposed to mean. But you would generally see it in like most shops. You would see it as a Shanghainese round noodle. You could also use Shanghainese flat noodles, which are essentially the noodles that you would get. Probably you'd be most familiar with them with things like chow mein, and like other like mian or mian, which is essentially just like round noodle. I guess like linguine or like pasta. And I'm going to use this. Going to be 12 ounces of round noodle here. Actually, these are flat noodles. If you don't have, or if you can't find Chinese noodles like this, you can also just use fettuccine. Would work. You could even use spaghetti. That would work fine too. All of those would be fine. Obviously it's gonna taste a little bit different, but it's still essentially the same thing. So these are our noodles. So the main difference between carpe diem, good question. Yeah, so the main difference between these noodles and what you would get from fettuccine is still made of wheat, but they're a lot more delicate than like a dry fettuccine or a dry spaghetti, which is like freeze dried. So those noodles, those like a fettuccine that you take out of the packet and you can snap them. They're basically like brittle. Those things take a really, really long time to boil. You could probably, some of them will take like 6 to 8, almost 10 minutes to get to an al dente on an Italian pasta. These Shanghainese flat noodles, they're obviously a lot more pliable and a lot more fresh, so they're going to take a lot less time. In some cases, you will even see me just cooking this in boiled water, so you'll just see me blanching it. Today I am going to cook it in a pot of boiling water, but it's going to happen really, really quickly. So we're only going to be boiling them for about 2 minutes. So those noodles are not going to take very long in the water, which also means anytime that you're cooking noodles that happen that quickly, that it means that you need to halt the cooking process immediately after it comes out of the water. Otherwise, it will continue to cook. So unless you get your timing perfectly right, it's going to keep cooking after you pull it out of the water. So you will pull it out, it's going to be perfectly cooked. It might even be slightly al dente. And then when you set them down and then go to cook the rest of the things, it's going to overcook. And then it will overcook off heat, which is not good. So what we want to do is set up a blanching station. So this is just ice water that I'm going to set up in my largest bowl. What we're going to do is right after we pull our noodles off of the stove, we're going to dump it straight into this ice water, and that's going to halt the cooking process, so it won't continue to cook at all anymore. So that's going to be really, really important, because after we pull them off of the heat, we're also going to put it back into our wok fry, which means that it is actually going to have an additional cook after it comes off of heat. So we absolutely don't want these things to continue to carry over cook, which is, if you've ever had Chinese noodles and they're a little bit mushy, that's what's happening, is they got overcooked at some point. Oh yeah, Karate Face, yeah, thanks for tuning in again. Yeah. Cool. So that's our noodles. What we're going to do is do our boil real quick. This is going to happen really quick. I would say I think the package instruction is 2 minutes. Or I think 2.5. Usually I shoot for like 1:45. Because I like to leave them a little bit more al dente than the package instructions. So these are going to go for exactly a minute and 45 seconds, maybe like a minute 50. But we're being very, very careful. Obviously, if you're cooking something for 2 minutes, that means that if you go over, so like 210, or like if you go slightly over like 230, you're definitely going to start wandering into overcooked noodle territory, which is the worst. Yeah. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, Karate Case, thank you. Yeah. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. With new recipes, those are coming out over on the YouTube channel every Friday. So last Friday, we came out with a recipe for a dan dan mian, or really, really simple and really, really pantry-friendly dan dan mian, which uses exclusively ingredients that come out of the pantry, which means it actually doesn't have any meat in it. We're replacing the meat with some deep-fried shallots that we're about to get to. If you're looking for those recipes, they all live over on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on Reddit, it's the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel you're already on. Good job. Those are out every Friday. So last Friday was this dish. Friday before that was something. What came out Friday? The Friday before that, I think beef chow fun, maybe. Friday before that, I think was chicken katsu. I can't quite remember anymore. This Friday coming up, we're going to be coming out with, forget. I think bibimbap is coming out this Friday. We probably should keep better track. Also, we just hit a minute 45, so I'm pulling my noodles out. And then I'm immediately going to blanch them in our ice water. And that's going to essentially halt the cooking process so that there will not be any additional carryover cook. We don't want these to continue cooking in any way after this. Once they're cooled down, you can pretty much pull them out of the water and you'll be out of the woods. And at this point, you can pretty much just let them sit. Once they're cooled down, they're not going to continue to carry over cook. But you'll notice that we just did a couple of things that are not really common in a lot of like Italian pastas that you'll notice. Mainly, we didn't save any pasta water. That's not a thing that you do in Chinese cooking. We also didn't salt that water at all. So in a lot of Italian cooking, you'll see them dumping huge amounts of salt in it. When I make carbonara, I usually season my pasta water with like a 1/4 cup of salt. Which is an absurd amount of salt. In Chinese cooking, that's not really a thing that you do because it's just, it like doesn't really come from Chinese cooking. So instead, what you very often will see, instead of saving that pasta water, you will super often see folks use cornstarch instead of that pasta water. Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, so a cut is more of a backward cut than... Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess like a cut would be more of a backwards cut, then a chop would be more of a downward motion. Do I have a preference? I think like Hermina, if I had a preference, it would depend on like what I'm cutting. So it mostly depends on what I'm cutting. Cool. Good question though. All right, over on the stove, I've got my wok heating up. That's going to take a couple of minutes for that, or not a couple of minutes, but at least a minute and change for that to come up to temperature. Yeah. You say a 1/4 cup? Yeah. I've heard like some recipes call for like more than that. I've seen some recipes call for like 1/2 cup of water of salt for pasta water, which is crazy because salt is expensive. So like especially if you're using like kosher salt, that's like 1/2 cup of salt. That's like $3 worth of salt. It's a lot of salt. So like not because I don't like the way it tastes. I mostly just don't usually use that much salt because I'm not going to waste that much salt on pasta water. But yeah, some of like the Bon Appetit recipes that I've seen, like the BA's Best Bolognese, I think that's probably the one that I've watched the most. I think it calls for like half a cup of salt, which is dumb. I'm not using that much salt. Usually when I do my pasta water, I'll probably like shake a good amount of salt in, which probably comes close to like a little less than a quarter cup. But mostly the reason that I use less than that is because it would cost way too much to use that much salt. Cool. All right. Cool. What was I saying? Yeah. Oh yeah. Cool. Yeah. So hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. If you haven't checked it out yet, I know Karate Face just mentioned it too. Definitely hop over to the YouTube channel and check out some of those recipes. Lots of fun stuff going on. We're also simultaneously live streaming on that channel, which I just noticed we lost the camera on. Yeah, we're also simultaneously live streaming over on YouTube too, which is the laptop behind me. Lots of fun streams. That's also where the schedule of streams lives, so if you're trying to find out what I'm going to be cooking next, that all lives over on YouTube, so if you haven't checked it out yet, definitely pop over there and check it out. We're working our way to 3,500 subs by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit that goal, hop over and check it out. Sarah, that's insane. Yeah, it is insane. I don't know who in their right mind can afford to spend that much on salt. Cool. So once your wok starts smoking like mine is, that's generally a sign that it is plenty hot to start cooking on. If you're not sure, what we're trying to do is we're looking for all of that smoke to start billowing off. Usually what I like to do is go about like a minute or like 45 seconds or so after it hits that smoke point. And that just really ensures that it's really, really hot. If it's not smoking though, that probably means it's not hot enough. The other way that you can tell if it's hot enough, once you put oil in the wok, and we give it our long yao, is if you put a wooden utensil in that oil, what you should see is a lot of bubbles coming up. So you see, yeah, you can totally see it. You'll see around my spatula, all of those bubbles are starting to come up and form around the spatula. That's generally a sign that oil is plenty hot to cook on. If you don't see those bubbles though, that's probably a sign that the wok is not hot enough, which just means stop what you're doing and let it continue to heat up before you move forward. So my shallots are going in, and we're going to give this a pinch of salt. What we're trying to do at this point is just shed some of the water off of our shallots here. We also want to be careful not to let these burn, so we're generally going to keep these in motion for the majority of the time that we're cooking them. Really just looking to get some of that water out of our shallots, so that when we go to deep fry them, they will be plenty crispy. Alright, so we're going to give that will probably take maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Bunny yams Costco, yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe I should start getting kosher salt at Costco. But usually, because I usually buy kosher salt at my corner store. And I think a 5-pound box of kosher salt is like $10, I think, something like that. It's not cheap. Salt is not cheap. So maybe I guess I could season with like cheaper salt. That might be a good move. All right. Yeah, hi, how's it going? More than a couple. Oh yeah, Sarah, for sure. I've seen chefs put absurd amounts of salt in it in pasta water. If you don't believe me, look up. Actually, I generally don't like referring to Bon Appetit because they've done some terrible shit. But Bon Appetit has a video. I think Andy Bergani did a really good recipe for bolognese, which is actually the bolognese that I cook when I am cooking bolognese for myself. And I'm pretty sure like you could see him on camera. He's putting like just the dumbest amount of salt in that pasta water. Molly for sure too does like salts in absurd quantities. So I'm being careful. I'm trying to keep my shallots in motion as much as possible here. You'll notice that the more time that you let it sit without moving, it starts to burn. So we want to be careful not to let these things burn here. But really what we're after is just kind of like getting those shallots to release some of their water so that when we go and deep fry them, they're going to be plenty crispy. Yeah, just looking up is going to give you high blood pressure, yeah. For sure. Yeah, but I guess it like depends on where you buy it. But for me, like a box of Diamond Kosher, 5-pound box of Diamond Kosher is expensive. It's like at least $10. All right. So these are looking relatively good. We don't need them to be fully cooked. I'm mostly just looking for like a relatively translucent shallot. All right. So, what I'm going to do next is we're going to rinse down our wok. We don't want to leave any of that stuff behind. And then we're going to set our stove up for a deep fry. Super important, especially if you're reusing the same wok. Before you start that deep fry, you need all of that water to be out. We want this wok has to be bone dry before you add that oil, because oil plus water equals splattering. So this thing has to be absolutely dry. You don't want to introduce any water to your deep fry because you're gonna get yourself some oil burns. So I'm wiping down the wok, and then we're gonna add our fryer oil. This is kind of old fryer oil. Probably gonna replace this. And then we're going to get this up to 350 before we start frying. Yeah. Yeah, down to not die over salting it, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you're not, Sarah, by the way, if you're not hip to it, one of my new favorite things for Italian cooking is bronze dye pastas. So if you check, it's going to cost like, it's not even that much more money, but bronze dye pastas, I think they're like maybe 50 cents, maybe 75 cents more per pack. And what's happening is those pastas are cut using bronze dyes instead of, I think, cheaper pastas are cut using Teflon dyes. And the sauce doesn't adhere as well to Teflon cut pastas. So one of my new favorite things for Italian cooking is anything that's cut with a bronze dye. Because the sauce will stick to it way better than anything cut with Teflon. So, one of my new favorite things. I also don't know that much about Italian cooking. So. Disclaimer. Punch your face. Yeah, that oil looks really dirty. Yeah, punch your face. That's a good point. I should point that out. The fryer oil, pretty dirty. I actually bought fresh fryer oil for this stream, but I decided not to use it because the things that we're deep frying are not actually going to be frying that much. So fryer oil is really expensive. I'm just going to use the old fryer oil. This was the oil that I was actually about to throw out, and then I just decided to reuse it for this last stream because we're not actually frying that much stuff. The shallots are probably only, how long are these frying? These shallots are going to fry for, yeah, 10 seconds. They're going to be in the fry oil for 10 seconds. So I don't actually even think that dirty fryer oil is going to make that much of a difference because they're going to be deep frying for such a short amount of time. But yeah, if you're right. If your fryer oil is that color, probably throw it out. Don't do what I did. Yeah, oh yeah, for sure, cool. So what I'm looking for is 350 on my fryer. We're at 200, so I'm gonna give that another minute or two. Yeah, cool. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna deep fry our shallots using a sieve to make sure we don't lose stuff. And that's going to be our shallots. So if you're not familiar with deep frying, you can also buy these things in the store. So you can buy pre-fried shallots, and they're super pantry safe. So you can actually make this entire dish with things that don't actually come off of any produce shelf, which means that this whole recipe is as pantry safe as a box of top ramen, which is really cool because it's going to be way tastier than a box of top ramen. So cool. Sichuan, yeah, throwaway, yeah, this is for sure a Sichuan noodle dish. So, for everyone just joining, my name is Wesley, this is Wu Can Cook. Today we're doing a Sichuan noodle dish called dandan mian. Dandan mian comes from a lot of different places in Chinese American cuisine. I've seen it in like a lot of Taiwanese cuisine. I've also seen it in a lot of Shanghainese cuisine. Just generally any kind of like Chinese cuisine that you see here in the States, you will probably see dandan mian. In some of the really Americanized dandan mian, in some of the really Americanized dandan mians, you will see them do it with peanut butter, which is actually my favorite way of doing it because I grew up eating peanut butter dandan mian. But if you can't find sesame paste, you can absolutely just make this with peanut butter, and it's going to taste really good. It's actually going to taste like peanut butter, what's wrong with peanut butter? So. If you're looking for the recipe video, that all lives over on YouTube. At this point in my voice, yeah, Sarah, if you're looking for the recipe video, that all lives over on YouTube. So Sarah just mentioned the recipe video that came out last Friday, where we made this dish on a recipe video, and kind of talked my way through some of the decision making that was going on, and how I sort of worked through the way that I reproduced this recipe, which is based off of a dish that you can find here in the Bay Area at a spot called Good to Eat Dumplings. In that recipe video, I also burned the shallots, which is what Sarah has mentioned, which is so disappointing because this recipe is so easy and I messed up the one thing that is hard to do. So be very careful, don't burn your shallots. So if you're looking for those recipes, they all live over on YouTube. Lots of fun stuff coming up over there, including new recipes every Friday. So we have a couple of series that are in progress right now. This one that we're cooking through is part of a series where we've been reproducing a lot of food from the San Francisco Bay Area food scene. So if you're trying to learn more about food in the San Francisco Bay Area, that's a fun series. We have another fun series that lots of people have been watching lately, which is entirely devoted to reproducing foods from Chinese American cuisine. So a lot of like really classic Chinese cuisine dishes like General Tso's chicken and honey sesame chicken, things like that. And kind of like taking a look at what it would look like if I were to try to reproduce those dishes without the American qualities, and like see what it would look like if those were actually Chinese dishes, because most of those things are not Chinese. They're pretty much just American food. So lots of fun stuff like that coming up on the YouTube channel. Those recipes are out every Friday. There's also a schedule of all of the live streams, so if you're trying to find out what I'm going to be cooking next, you can look that up and tune in. What is frying oil? Yeah. Punch your face. Yeah, good. Punch your face oil is a really good username, by the way. What is fryer oil? Fryer oil is just like any other cooking oil. So the main reason that we designate it is because it's the same oil that you use for the fryer. So you're not going to probably not going to want to cook with it because it's eventually going to start imparting flavor to it. So my fryer oil is the one that I'm using today is exclusively used for savory things. So I don't ever try and like fry donuts in my fryer oil because it will make everything that I fry after that taste like donuts. So not the worst thing. But if you're trying to not like impart bias to your fryer oil, that will definitely happen. So you probably could cook with it, but you're probably not going to want to because the fryer oil, as you use it, the more that you deep fry with that oil, the more that it will impart color. So I know that you mentioned earlier that the fryer oil was looking really dark. So that's because this fryer oil, I think it's been used maybe 6 times now, maybe more than that even, which is probably more times than you should reuse fryer oil. So if your fryer oil starts looking that dark, what you probably need to do is change it. So you probably need to throw it out and buy some new fryer oil. So you'll notice that when we put that fryer oil in, it was like dark brown. But if we take a look, got some time while the fryer oil heats up, this is the color that it was supposed to be, which is bright yellow. So if the fryer oil starts turning dark brown and it was originally this color, that means that it's probably a little bit burned, has a lot of like particulate flavor that's been imparted over the last 5 or 6 cooks that has come from it. The problem, or the reason that we reuse that fryer oil though, is because fryer oil, number one, is very expensive. That's like $4 a bottle, so you don't want to reuse it every fry. But number two is because fryer oil is really hard to dispose of, so you have to like take it to a recycling plant the same way that you recycle motor oil. You have to take it to a recycling plant. It can't go in landfill. It can't go down your sink. You can't put it in your garbage can. All of those things, you can't put it in recycling bins. All of those things make it very, very difficult to dispose of. So the more that we can reuse it, the more less waste that we produce, and like have that stuff start building up. So in my garage, I think there's 3 or 4 bottles or crates, bottles of this fryer oil that I've kind of gone through over the last year or so, which means that I probably need to make a trip to the recycling plant soon. So that's like the main inspiration for why you want to reuse the fryer oil. It's because it's really annoying to throw it out. You have to like make a whole trip that's designated to throwing out your fryer oil. Almond boneless chicken, Texas Pain. I haven't heard of that, but I'll have to look it up. That sounds cool. Yeah, that sounds cool. I love doing requests, because a lot of the times the things that people request are things that I have never tried to cook before, especially for that Chinese American series, because there's so much stuff from Chinese American food that I've never heard of or tried to cook in my life. Someone mentioned, I think it was last week, it was a St. Louis, I think, or it was a sandwich made from white bread using egg foo young. And I think it was from St. Louis, or maybe it was from Michigan. I can't remember now. But it sounded so cool, and I'm probably going to try cook it and see what happens. So things like that. Yeah, I'll add it to the list. I'll have to look it up and see if I can figure out how to make it. I mean, I need 20 of those thermometers for Christmas. I do, yeah. Ooh. Okay, so my fryer oil is nice and hot. We actually just passed 400, which is too hot. So I'm going to let this oil cool down. We actually went too far, so our fryer oil is probably at like 500 right now, so it's too hot. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so what was I saying? Yeah, I love requests. Requests are super fun because it always like gets me to start cooking things that I have never tried before. Some of the egg foo young recipe that I had done was a request. Someone had asked for that, which is interesting because I have seen a lot of egg foo young over the like lifetime of eating Chinese food, but I've actually never eaten egg foo young because it comes from Chinese American food. Not really a thing that like most Chinese families will go out of their way to eat. Mostly just an American dish. And it was really interesting, like trying to figure out how to cook egg foo young. I actually ended up deep frying it, which was like an interesting approach that I think most people have not seen. So, yeah, cool. All right. So before, I guess we should probably set this stage up. Let's do this. So, I mentioned this earlier, but our fry is only going to take 5 seconds. So we're going to be frying our onions for a total of 5 seconds, which means that we, again, just like our pasta, need to halt that cooking process immediately after it comes off of the fry. Otherwise, it will overcook. So Sarah mentioned a YouTube video earlier too, but in that video, I cooked the shallots to perfection. So when I pulled them out of the fry, they were a deep golden brown. They were perfect. They looked perfect when I pulled them out. But they kept cooking after I pulled them out. So once they came out of the fry, and then I put them down, and then they overcooked because they continued to cook while I had them on the sheet. So don't forget, anytime that you're deep frying something that takes as short of a time as 5 seconds, 2 seconds, don't forget to account for carryover cook, because that shit will absolutely carryover cook, and then you're going to have a bad time. So I'm going to do these in batches. So I'm going to start with some spoonfuls. So here's our shallot and our fry. And we're going to dip this in for 5 seconds. And that's going to do it. So as you can see, that was a really, really short amount of time. If your fryer oil is that dirty, but you're only doing it for such a short amount of time, I don't really think it's going to make that much of a difference. All right, one more time with the second batch. And here's our final batch. And that is it. That's it for our deep fry. So really, really quick fry. That all happened 5 seconds apiece for each of those fries. And that is it for our deep fry. All right, next up, I'm removing my fryer oil here very, very carefully. And then we're going to start our wok fry. Oh, you just discovered air frying. Yeah, air frying probably be a good. This would be a good use for air frying because there's so not a lot involved with the fry. And some of the stuff that I've had from air fryers, it comes out pretty crunchy and then it starts turning soggy like a lot quicker than a standard deep fry would do. It might be because I'm doing it wrong, but I haven't had a lot of good luck with deep air frying. I maybe need to toy around with it more. But yeah, a lot of I've tried air frying lumpia, or I've even tried air frying dumplings, so fried wontons, and you don't get it will come out super crunchy. So you'll get at the start when it comes out of that fryer, it's going to be pretty crunchy, but then after I don't know, 10 minutes, maybe even less than that, it starts turning really soggy. So I guess if you're gonna eat it right after pulling it out of the fryer, it'll probably be okay. But I just haven't had a lot of good luck getting those things to work well for me. I don't know. Might be doing it wrong though. Yeah. Anti-Cryptos, yeah. Hello if you're just tuning in. Today we're doing a dandan mian, which is a sesame paste Sichuan noodle dish. We're about to finish up our cook here, actually. So you will notice that everything else that we're going to be cooking, so the entire stream that we just took, that was almost an hour of streaming so far, that was all just chopping stuff. Mostly actually just talking through it. If I was doing this without streaming, I probably could cook this in 5-10 minutes. But you will notice that the rest of what we're cooking today is going to happen really quick. So the rest of this wok fry, no more than 5 minutes probably, maybe even less than that. And that's because wok frying happens on really hot heat. So because the heat is so hot, everything cooks really quickly. So you call that a flash cook. So that means that once you're starting to cook in the wok, everything has to be chopped already. You don't want to be cooking or chopping. You don't want to be cutting anything. You don't want to be prepping anything, because once things are in the wok, you're going to be on the timer for paying attention to everything that's happening, because everything is going to be timed very carefully, because that heat is so aggressive. Yeah, a table to convection oven. Yeah, that's kind of accurate. I think it also involves some a little bit of oil though. Yeah, the crunch doesn't last as long as real oil frying, but it's probably a lot healthier though, so I don't know, give and take. Cool. Yeah. Do I ever consider streaming on Twitch? Arbitrary, yeah. So I used to stream on Twitch a little bit. Usually, I do stream on multiple platforms. So the other platform that's behind me, the laptop that's behind me, goes to my YouTube channel, and then we also live stream on YouTube, which is fun. I used to stream on Twitch, but didn't really have very much traction, and I wasn't really using it, so I kind of just stopped using it. I think it still exists. There's probably a twitch.tv/LieuCanCook somewhere out there, but I just stopped using it. So. But yeah, if you're trying to find the other live stream that's going on behind me, that's on YouTube, which is youtube.com/LieuCanCook. That's where the whole schedule is. So you can bookmark the streams that you want to watch. You can find out what I'm going to be cooking next. That's also where all the recipe videos come out. So if you're looking for all that stuff, it lives over on YouTube. Cool. All right, so if you're not sure if your wok's hot enough yet, that's a good sign. Generally, when you start seeing that smoke coming up, it's probably a good sign. I like to give it a little bit more time, so I'm gonna give it like maybe 10-15 seconds more. Once it starts smoking, though, that's generally a sign that it's plenty hot. Yeah. Cool. All right, let's do it. So I'm adding, this is going to be 4 tablespoons of peanut oil. And then the first thing that we're going to do is bloom our aromatics. So this is my ginger and my garlic. And then we're going to give this a toss just long enough until it's fragrant. So use your nose. That's usually about 10 seconds for me. Kind of depends on how much oil and how hot your fryer is, though, or how hot your wok is. All right, next up is my noodles going in. Followed by my sauce. Usually I'm generally a big advocate for using small amounts of the sauce to making sure that we don't over season here. But I actually think that having a little bit of extra sauce in this case is not going to hurt. So I like to just add the whole thing. And what I'm going to do is add a little bit more water to the wok too. And that's going to loosen things up and kind of like get everything nice and saucy for us. All right. So I'm going to give this maybe a minute, maybe a little bit less than that. Just long enough for our sauce to really reach that consistency that we're looking for here. I am going to pull it off a little bit early, so I am going to let that sauce be a little bit watery before I pull it off. And that's because it's going to tighten up in the bowl, especially as you eat it, it's going to start tightening up even. So I like to leave it a little bit watery, just to kind of give us some time to pull together off heat. So I'm going to let that reduce. We're going to give it maybe a minute to kind of like reduce and pull together, and then we should be ready to eat. That ought to do it. Air frying is like a raging fire, convection oven is like a smoldering fire. Yeah, both are pretty similar. I would rather have a convection oven than an air fryer, to be honest, because convection oven you can do a lot more than air frying. Yeah, yeah, really just words, that's exactly it. So a convection oven is an oven that has a fan that circulates the air, which is really, really useful in baking because it gets you like a more even bake. So if you've ever baked something and like you have like hot spots and cold spots in your oven, you can solve that problem with convection oven, which is really useful because I know for sure that my oven has a lot of cold spots and like certain areas of the oven are a lot colder than other areas of the oven, which is a big problem with baking bread, for example, because you're going to end up with certain parts of the bread being more cooked than other parts. So there are many ways of solving that problem, but I think like by far the industry standard of solving that problem is using convection baking. So I'm removing this from heat. And then the last thing that we want to do anytime that we're done cooking is clean your wok. Good wok care. Remember to clean your wok after you finish cooking. Because especially if your wok is made out of carbon steel like mine, carbon steel will start to carbonize once it gets wet. So if you leave that water sitting in the wok, it's eventually going to start rusting, which is the worst possible thing that you can do in carbon steel. And I have actually done that before, and it sucks. Pretty much will ruin it. You can't really save. Once carbon steel starts rusting, there's not really anything that you can do. You pretty much have to throw it out. If it's on the cooking surface, you pretty much have to throw it out, which is not good. So, super, super important when you're done cooking, give it a coating of oil. That's going to prevent everything from rusting. And should do it. All right. The view on YouTube is much nicer. Yeah, I've been told that. Yeah, I've heard that especially if you're watching on like desktop, I've heard that it looks nicer because it's nice and panoramic. Ooh, would I add veggies to this at all? Yeah, I would totally add veggies to this. There are a number of different ways that you can do a dandan mian that do include veggies. There is actually a second version of a dandan mian that has a whole bunch of other stuff to it. I believe it was made with ground pork. It has carrots I think it has carrots and cucumbers in it, something like that. There are all kinds of different ways of doing a dandan mian. The one where we're doing today, though, is meant to be really, really pantry friendly. So like something that you can cook without using a huge amount of ingredients, and more specifically, something that you can cook without relying on things that will go bad. So it's like a really, really good college meal. This one that we're doing today is based off of a recipe that comes from a restaurant. It's actually a pop-up restaurant that's inside of a brewery. And the reason that I think that this dish is so pantry friendly is because they're making it in the back of a brewery. I think that's why it's so pantry friendly. But more traditionally, when you see a dandan mian, you would probably see it done with probably ground pork. It would probably some kind of veggies in it too. It would probably have carrot. If not carrot, then cucumber. Probably shredded cucumber is the more traditional thing. Yeah. Oh, condiments. Yeah. Interscholastic, yeah, that's what we're getting to. So how do we want to do this? So we are actually going to add a whole bunch of condiments. I'm going to start off with our sesame seeds. Sesame seeds, I found they don't really taste like anything, but they add a really, really fun texture. So I think, especially for a dish like a dandan mian, especially one that's this simple, it's a really, really important element. Because there's not a lot going on, so that texture adds a whole lot. Next up is our fried shallots, or deep fried shallots now. And finally is our onions. Yeah. That ought to do it. Cool. What does it look like elastic bands? Yeah, because they're flat noodles, so they look a little bit different. I would say like these probably look most similar to like a linguine. That's probably like the most similar size that you would see is a linguine. Although I'm not sure that a linguine is necessarily that thin. I would say probably closer to like a fettuccine, but like half of the width of a fettuccine. How is the shape of the wok important? Yeah, good question. So mine is a round bottom wok, so you can tell, mostly because the wok rolls around a lot, so you can see when I touch it, kind of bounces around. That's because the bottom of the wok is round, unlike most frying pans that you would probably work with, which will have a flat bottom, probably a heavy bottom to it. A round bottom wok, it doesn't quite. It doesn't have a flat bottom to it, so it also doesn't have a heavy bottom to it, which means that it's not going to retain heat in the same way that a frying pan does. I've found that you could probably use them interchangeably. If you're new to wok cooking, if you've never cooked on a wok before, probably a flat bottom wok is going to feel the most similar to like a standard frying pan probably every frying pan that you've ever used. I love using the round bottom wok because I find that having the round bottom helps me toss a little bit better, so it gives me like a little bit more agility in the wok tossing. But really the cook is going to end up being the same. It's also really, really useful for deep frying because that round bottom is super useful because it gathers oil a little bit better, so you can use smaller amounts of oil in the deep fry than you would otherwise if you were doing it in like a Dutch oven, which is going to spread out a little bit more. But really, either will be fine. Generally, when folks ask me for recommendations on woks, I usually suggest if you've never cooked in a wok before, get yourself a good flat bottom wok, and it's going to be most familiar to you. Yeah. Cool. All right, let's give this a taste. Yeah. This is one of my favorite like easy meals to do because it's just like you could probably do this meal in like 10-15 minutes if you're not talking. And it's just like super flavorful and really adaptable. If you want to add other things, you can totally do that. There's even another recipe for a similar dan dan mian that uses ground pork, which is probably really traditional. You can add ground peanuts. That's going to be really familiar to a lot of dan dan mians that you've had. You could substitute the sesame paste with peanut butter, which will work really great. When I use peanut butter, I love using crunchy peanut butter because it will add a little bit of crunch from those peanuts too, so you can even skip the peanuts and make it even easier. You could garnish it with any kind of fresh veggies that you want. You could use, I know my mom likes to use grated zucchini, which I always thought was really gross when I was a kid. But I like, when I do dan dan mians, I like finishing it with grated carrot, or grated carrot or grated cucumber or both. Also, all really great. It's nice to have like that fresh veggie element to kind of cut the thickness and like richness of the sauce. Bean sprouts, yeah, bean sprouts would work really great too. You could throw those bean sprouts in really late, and you'd have a nice bit of crunch. Any of those things would work. All really good ways of like spicing up a dan dan mian. But in its most like basic form, it's probably going to look something like this. Yeah. So if you're looking for the recipe, that all lives over on YouTube. So I should start remembering to link this more often. Here's the recipe. So if you're looking for that, that lives over there. Lots of fun stuff coming up over there. Those recipes are a little bit easier to follow. There's also a written version, so if you're trying to figure out how to cook the things that I'm cooking, that's generally a good thing to bookmark because you can follow along a little bit easier, and it won't take an hour and 15 minutes. You can probably watch it in, I think it takes like 5 minutes. There's also a lot of recipe videos out now, so lots of people have been binge watching the recipe videos, which is, you can do that if you want. I think there's probably like 3-4 hours of recipe videos, so I know that people just like to listen to me talk, which is cool. You could do that too. I know lots of people also like to watch me chop stuff, which is another good thing that you can use those recipe videos for. So let me know if you have any questions. I'll be here doing dishes. I think I answered most folks, but if I missed anything, feel free and repeat yourself. Oh yeah. Cool, yeah. LD read it before you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for subscribing. We're working our way to 3,500 subs by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit that subscriber goal, hop over and check out what's going on over there. Hopefully we can hit it. So, cool. Let me know if you have any questions. Oh yeah, the last thing that lots of people ask about is the music, which is all these things that I wrote. That all lives under Woo Cook's Beats, so there's the music. Lots of fun stuff coming up over on Woo Cook's Beats. We generally, if you're watching a recipe video or if you're watching a stream, the music that you're listening to underneath my voice is probably something that I wrote, or it's almost certainly something that I wrote. So that all lives over on Woo Cook's Beats. That's, I think, on Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, everywhere where music is. So cool. All right, thanks guys. Tomorrow we're doing Japanese curry, Japanese white miso curry. So that's coming up tomorrow. So tune in tomorrow, 6:30 PST again. We'll be cooking through that. All right, thanks everyone. I'll see you soon.
You're as sweet as job everywhere. Your bed, warm, glass of brandy, darling, I'll stay stone on your love all the time. Slow. If you come over and start up a conversation with just me, then trust me, I'll give it a chance. Now take my hand, stop, put Ben the man on the jukebox, and then we start to dance. Now I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me, said boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too, I'm in love with your body. And last night you were in my room, and now my bed sheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you. One weekend we let the story begin. We're going out on our first date. You and me are thrifty, so go all you can eat. Fill up your bag and I fill up a plate. We talk for hours and hours about the sweet and the sour, and how your family is doing okay. We'll even get in a taxi, we'll kiss in the backseat, tell the driver make the radio play. Now I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me. You said, boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. And last night you were in my room. And now my bed sheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you. Come on, be my baby, come on. 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 Come on, be my baby, come on.